In a stressful year, full of uncertainty and change, one thing we haven't spent a lot of time thinking about might be joy. So today we are going to be talking about joy as a source of personal and community resilience, well-being, strength, and agency. Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. This is a 30-minute conversation with the leaders of mission-based organizations about leading through challenging times. I'm joined today by my co-hosts, Cynthia and Rebecca. Good morning.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good morning. How are you today?
Excellent.
Hi, Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca. I'm Cynthia Rojas, and I am the founder and principal of To Your Growth.
I'm Rebecca Tuttle, and I'm the founder and creator of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good.
Hey, welcome,
And I'm Peter
everyone.
Blakely. I am the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Yay!
It's been a stressful, uncertain, unsettling year. And in stressful and uncertain times, we don't always think about joy. So Thaddeus Miles is joining us today to talk about joy as an act of resistance, a way of claiming our agency, and a source of resilience. Thaddeus is committed to ensuring that the most underserved communities and members of our cities have genuine opportunities for success and achievement. Thaddeus is the founder of HoodFit, a program that focuses on physical, spiritual, financial, and mental fitness in the communities of color in Boston. He's the founder of the Only 5K Run through the streets of Roxbury. He's the host of an upcoming podcast on Black Joy. He sits on multiple nonprofit boards. He directs the community services program at Mass Housing. He's a recipient of the Embracing the Legacy Award from the John F. Kennedy Action Corp. And he's a veteran, a father, and a grandfather, and an artist. And we are so happy, Thaddeus, that you made time to join us today.
Yay!
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It is a pleasure. I watch your show every Friday, and it's a pleasure to actually be part of it.
It's great to have you. So Thaddeus, tell us briefly, what does joy mean to you?
So joy for me is a seed that was implanted in us before we were actually arrived on this earth. It is a seed that needs to be nourished to give us hope, opportunity, and optimism. Joy is also our power, right? It is how we get our voice. And it's usually the first thing that people want to take from us is your joy, right? And without joy, it's too easy to dive into your identity of the negative aspect of your challenges. It's sort of like, look at me, I've been hurt, versus look at me, I've been healed. And through joy, it's starting to look at how you've been healed, how you've come through the challenges of life, and how do you move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So what you're saying, Thaddeus, and this is important, is that it's inside of us. It's not something like I've heard. I watched Oprah for many years, and she used to
Right.
distinguish between happiness and joy.
Right.
Happiness is an external factor influencing how you feel. Joy comes from within. Is that
Yes,
what
exactly. Joy to me is a God-given gift that allows us to fulfill our purpose in life. You know, each one of us are born with something unique to do that only we can do, and if we don't do it, then it won't be done. And I believe in order for us to be able to do that, it needs to be driven through joy, not through other aspects of life. And joy is deep within the soul, right? It nourishes every cell, every micro cell, whatever, however you want to define it, that's in our body.
So tell us a little bit. Tell us a little bit about what that means. In an organization, in a community, how does it mean to work from joy or with joy?
Well, so I think the first thing that I always do, and especially when it comes to working in communities that are under-resourced, underserved, and viewed in certain ways, and how do we think about what that looks like? And so I come at it from a leader's perspective, and at the same time a follower. And so I like to look at, am I looking at this through an eye of pity, where I'm acknowledging the pain? Am I looking at it through sympathy, where I care about your suffering? Am I looking at it through empathy, where I feel your suffering in order to get to compassion? I want to relieve your suffering. And so for me, it's important to be able to address your own issues, to be able to focus on working with the community, what the issues are, and to be able to come to solutions and be able to impact those solutions and have sustainable impact.
Hmm.
We have
So,
some comments. Can we?
go ahead.
Can we just?
Yeah.
They're good.
We've only been on 2
A
minutes.
lot of comments.
Yeah, we have a lot of people watching today. So, Sharon says, "Good to see this whole crew." Yes, it is.
Yay,
Sharon.
Hey, brother, good to see you, King.
There's so many comments. I know Myra says, "Joy is deep within the soul." Renee says, "Yes, joy is the place to be." So Myra and Renee, welcome to the show this morning. If you're joining us from another place around the world, let us know where you're from. Pop in the chat. We'd love to talk joy with you today.
Yeah. So that is sometimes see I tend to be an optimist. I tend to be I try to get in tune with my sense of joy, distinguish happiness. And sometimes that's not appreciated because it looks like it can feel disrespectful to other people. We also tend to, as humans, wallow in I think you mentioned it, self-pity or what's happening. People call it bad luck and they think, oh, if I had no luck, there was no such thing as bad luck, I would have no luck. And so what do you say to people who are in that space, or organizations that are in that space who can't see the light?
Yeah, I think it's that to me is about your mindset, right? And when you
Mm,
start to look at your mindset, the mindset has a big impact on how we perceive ourselves and ultimately how successful we can become. And it's sort of like in life, what's the saying that 10% of what happens to you, uh, you can control 10% of what happens to you, but
mhm,
90% is how you react in life. Just 10% is what happens, and 90% is how you react.
yeah.
And if we can learn to view obstacles as learning opportunities instead of unbearable problems, then we can more adapt to finding solutions. But I also think that we have to start to figure out, like, what does resilience look like, right? And to understand that resilience is a lifelong project. Resilience is the ability to grapple with life and emerge stronger and better for it, right? And it's learning something, not just bouncing back. So it's
Mm,
really being able to have people really think about their mindset. It is also to be able to tap into their resilience, but at the same time meet them where they're at, and to be able to explain the difference of happiness. Happiness is to me is I play the lottery for $1 and I win $50. I'm happy about it, but that's not really joy. But it's also meeting people where they're at and how you're responding to them. And so the same thing that I talked about earlier of how I view other folks of pity, sympathy, empathy, and compassion, I also have to look at myself. Where am I coming from? And
mm,
am I dealing with it because I have pity for myself? Am I looking at it from a perspective of pity with inside of me because it's triggered something and I think I'm in compassion, but I'm really dealing with my own issue of trauma. And so
yeah.
it's being able to walk through your own shadows. We all have our shadows and our darkness that we have to deal with every day, but it's really getting help and moving forward with that and being self acceptance, right? And I think the
Mhm,
other thing is really for me is like naming. A lot of people haven't named their truth, and accepting and forgiving yourself and having compassion for yourself, which leads to self love, right? And so, naming your truth, understanding your North Star and how to get there is extremely important when we start to think about joy and how to move through it. But the last thing I would say is asking for help and being able to talk to people and have real conversations, that network. So, like for me, when I'm challenged around something, I can call Ron. I can call Pastor Odom. I can call other brothers to really acknowledge and affirm me, even though I may be going through something as a father and feel like I failed, which is a real scenario for me that I failed in certain parts. But having people to come in to affirm me is really that I am a good father, that I have done everything that I could do, that I have taken those steps from other men or from other women, is a way of addressing some of those challenges that we're facing. And I think as people of color, we're facing the micro aggressions, the micro invalidations, and the micro assaults on a daily basis. Those small cuts would build up to start for us to invalidate our own internal selves. But it goes
Yeah,
back to what I was saying earlier. That is very without joy and putting joy in your space. It is very easy to live in your pain and to live as a victim instead of a person that's been healed.
I
And
love
and
that.
when you do that, that's the way that you project your pain onto others, and you're not really helping the community heal and to move forward. Doesn't mean that you don't have winning moments, but
Right.
it's, at that point, it's not sustainable, right? And what we need in this time and on is sustainable power, voice, vision, creativity, and innovation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Coming to truth with that, as you're saying, name your truth, that's really difficult. But I think that once you get to the truth, they say the truth will set you free. That could be a pivotal moment. And I'm not talking about everyone's pivoting in the pandemic. I mean, that could be a pivotal moment for an organization who's struggling with their team dynamics. If you're bringing baggage to the job every day or to the organization every day and it's in crisis, you have to have people on the team that help you through that, just as you're saying, so that it can kind of crack that in people.
I think that, now that it feels, God, I hope I don't jinx us, but it feels like we're coming to an end, right? There's a vaccine at the end of the tunnel. We can almost touch it. It's almost there. And so, yeah, I'm still talking to leaders of nonprofit organizations, and we all are, who are very stressed out, who are still dysregulated, who are still dealing with the negative impact. But I wonder if if once we get the vaccine and there's this new normal and this is behind us, right? Would we have missed the opportunity to feel joy even in these moments? And so Rebecca talks about this all the time, right? She talked, well, off camera, about what this time has meant to her and how
Right.
she's been able to share time with her family, even in the craziest of pandemics, and she's been in her home for 8 months, she still experiences an enormous amount of joy through all of this pain. And it feels like, Thaddeus, that's what you're talking about, letting that come out from inside of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at you find that everybody's got a commercial about joy now, right? When I was initially talking about, it's that
Mhm.
season. But I think the other thing that we fail to do sometimes is to align our work to passion, right? And it's
Mm,
finding out how all the big picture stuff integrates into your daily life isn't easy, right? But
mhm.
there's also nothing like the feeling of unmet potential and regret that we were too scared to go after. Right. So there's something about
Right.
that, I mean, and joy will allow us to sort of, to me, or for me, let me speak for me, has allowed me to be able to have my voice and to not let fear be the determining factor of how I move forward, and to
Mm,
be able to accept failure as a lesson learned that I needed to learn in order to move forward to be successful in that next step, right?
yeah.
And and I find that's really the challenge. But I agree with you. It's really I was on a group speaking to a group of young people, and another panelist. I had to ask her a question, and I'm like, "How have you found your joy this through the three pandemics that we're dealing with,
Yeah.
right? We're
Thank
dealing
you.
with, we're dealing with three different levels of issues." And she's like, "You know what? That's a good question." And I'm starting to sing songs with my daughter. We're actually eating together. We're having different conversations. We're going outside, and she's like, "I've been thinking about all of the challenges that I've been facing through this and not really realizing that the amount of time I've had with my family has just been amazing and
Yeah.
has lifted me and helped me move through it. And so it's very easy to have those short moments, right, that we forget and we walk
Yeah.
by because we have that good moment, like we're having a great conversation here. Then at 11:05, all hell breaks loose, and we forget,
We better enjoy this.
One
right,
of the
and we forget about it.
one of the things that we've discovered over and over, through, both in our personal lives and through talking to different nonprofit leaders over the last 9 months now, I think, is people have less bandwidth. Where there's a certain amount of stress, there's a certain amount of energy that living through multiple pandemics is taking. And so people don't have time for extra stuff. And this is true on the personal level and the organizational level. And in a way, it's a gift because people and organizations are coming to their one most fundamental thing, and asking, what are our values and how do we serve, and focusing on that.
Right.
It's a
Mm.
real
So,
opportunity for strength.
so I would challenge you on that, right?
Mhm.
I would say that people have more drive and grit than they know,
Yep.
Mm.
right? And so for me, the very act of having goals to work towards builds resilience, right? And if you've ever had the pleasure of achieving far off goals, you know a lot of the pleasure that brings, right? But there's also this thing that achievers who are successful versus those who aren't based. It's not based on creativity, innovation, talent, but rather on their persistence. And so I think when we started to think about time and we think about other components, I really started to think about joy, allowing us to tap deeper into our drive and to tap deeper into our grit, which helps build our resilience to be able to move forward and accomplish some of those goals, and to be able to modify some of those time concerns that we have and some of those things that sometimes seem overwhelming, that we actually achieve them.
Mm. I had a question and it just left my mind. Sorry. Oh, you mentioned early on that joy is where our power lies.
Mhm.
Can you talk? I've never heard of joy being associated to power. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think Ayanna Presley always talks about how joy is the true resilience and how we build upon that to be able to move forward. And so, for me, when you are struggling in the pity mode or sympathy mode around other things or around yourself, it weakens your voice. It doesn't allow you to speak truth to power. But when you're how do I say it? When you're filled with the spirit of joy, those things that are outside noise have a tendency to fade away differently, and it allows you to really be able to drive into. I go back to understanding your purpose, aligning your work and your passion to be able to dive into your grit a little bit differently, and to be able to name your truth. But when you're always searching, and you're always back in that aspect of pain, that it's really hard to move from pain to truth to power. And so it's
Mm.
sort of convoluted to sort of talk about in a certain way, but it's really around joy is what gives you voice, gives you opportunity, gives you hope, gives you drive, that gives you optimism, uh, and that leads to the building upon your faith, right? And having faith that what it is that you believe, what your north star is, and what you believe your purpose is, will be accomplished. I'm a believer. I'm a big believer in if I'm only thinking about things that I can accomplish in my lifetime, then I'm thinking too small, right? I need to be thinking about things that my son and my grandson can accomplish, and so and to be able to drive what it is I want to do, so that I'm living through them. Because I believe as a photographer, I need to speak through the lens of the camera, but also give voice to my ancestors, right? Because my ancestors drove through and survived. and in order for me to speak for them, right? Those that aren't here and can't speak for themselves. And also, I would say that when we think about slavery as a black man, uh, I don't know how they got through it without joy, right? And how they used to be punished
Mm.
because of joy, right? So them singing, them rejoicing, them being able to move forward with joy. And when I think about when you listen to any of the great speeches by the great civil rights activists, all of them have a compassion and talk about joy. And I think for
Wow.
us to be able to think about life, we can't move through life without having compassion for others and compassion for ourselves,
And that's key. Yeah, you
right?
need compassion for yourself.
And
Yeah.
there's no way to get that if you don't have joy and if you
Right.
can't experience joy. And so
Right.
that's what I mean by joy being our power.
Yeah.
But that's an example of it being within, because you can't take away from me or us what's deeply rooted in here, your belief. You can try to inflict negativity upon me, but what's in here is what you express out. It reminds me of the saying when you hear people say, well, you brought it upon yourself. And you don't bring the incident or the hurt or the pain upon yourself. You have the power within to respond, just as you're saying. You could either respond from the negative or you could respond from what's deep within. I'm a firm believer in how you portray yourself is something that's inside of you. So everything you're saying is just resonating within my soul.
Well,
Yeah,
I
'cause
Really.
think, Rebecca, you really know how to experience joy from the very moment that I met you. I can feel it. I mean, if you sit next to Rebecca, you feel her
Mhm.
joy. Every angle perspective that she takes is really about compassion for the other and compassion for herself, and
And
really
optimism.
finding the love in everything she does. I mean, she's an example. Thaddeus, you could take her around the country and show people this is what joy looks like. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
No,
like
I want to bring back some of the comments.
Yes, I was going to do that next.
okay.
Thank you, Cynthia. That's so kind of you.
yeah, but that's real though, because we feel that energy, it's for
Mhm.
me, you can feel that negative energy when you walk in the room for somebody that's just struggling and wants to bring conflict, right? But you
Right.
can also feel that other energy from that person that's just there, full of love and joy, and is looking forward towards that opportunity. And that's that counter workmate that you come in that's mad every day,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
joy is not this thing where I'm running, I'm super happy and dancing all the
Right. It's
time,
not
right?
exuberant.
But
Yeah.
joy is also a stillness and a calmness, right? That
Mm.
simmers and gives and allows you to rise above and to be able to take that moment before you respond. So joy doesn't happiness is all of that, right? That's
Right. Right.
happy, right? You
One
know
of
what I mean?
the things that we talked about early on was managing in a time of crisis, but not from a place of crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe the opposite is from a place of joy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important, and I think that's why I always try to look at. I'm going back to: am I looking at something from a place of pity, sympathy, empathy, or compassion? And that
Mhm.
pity and compassion can always look the same sometimes if you're not looking at, is this triggering me?
Yeah.
Right? Because I've been in meetings where I've been triggered and I act out and I say something that I shouldn't have said about whatever's happening, or I've just made a decision because I haven't really looked at myself, right? Because some of the stuff is triggering me. I grew up in a single mom, 3 kids, moved several times, but all of us went off to college. All of us are doing well. And so I could either take this point of growing up and getting free lunch be my identity, or that I lived through that, I learned through that, I built my resilience through those particular issues, and now I'm able to tap into that and to be able to do something for somebody else and give my mom her flowers while she's still alive, right? And
I love
so
that.
that's the challenge.
I love Rebecca. Do we want to go to comments?
bring up some
Yeah,
comments.
but can I ask a question, Thaddeus?
Sure.
So, because you brought up a great point, and Cynthia has been talking about this a lot. With a change is hard. There's a lot of emotion behind it. So if you go into that meeting with that energy that maybe isn't the most favorable, what do you do after that? Because it affects the whole meeting. So what do you do? Because right now there's a lot of people going into meetings like that because there's so much crises all around us.
Yeah. It's hard, right? But I think it's one of those things where when I go into a meeting and I'm feeling some type of way, I decide to just sit and listen, and that I'm not going to speak until I'm prepared, until I've actually worked through what it is that's challenging me. And sometimes it has nothing to do with that meeting. It could just be my son got on my nerves that day because he called me and asked me for something that he should have been able to do his damn self. So, you know what I mean? But you know what I mean? And I think but I also think it's the people in the meeting recognizing that there may be something and taking some time to really sort of dig into what's going on, because we don't know what's happening in other people's lives, right?
Right.
And so what I like about my team at Mass Housing is we're honest, and we call each other out, right? And so I always try to have one of them in the meeting with me, or at least all of us connected, because I've had some issues where I've really had to struggle because I've had some crises, sort of, and I'll say I had my great nephew died at 3 years old from a gunshot wound, and so after that I was going through meetings and I was struggling, um, but as being in those positions, we still got to go through it, and we try to put this mask on that we're not hurting. Right. And, and so even though I wasn't as close to him, I still have a grandson that's 3 years old. And so every time I look at my grandson, I was working through that. But my team would call me out and say, Thaddeus, we just need you to turn your camera off and breathe a little bit. I get that chat, right? And breathe and then come back on. Right. And I think that's the hard part, having somebody with you that can hold you accountable, but taking the time to sort of listen and knowing yourself enough to sometimes just be quiet.
Nice.
To Ron, we have a lot of comments. I think it would be great to honor them if you don't mind. And my apologies for covering you, Thaddeus. Turan says, surprisingly less bandwidth. At the beginning of the pandemic, time was shifted in dramatic. Was that sifted the essential from non-essential matters. But the essential hit us at a scale that dominates a lot of time and certainly overwhelms our psyches in dramatic ways. That is so true.
Yeah.
That's definitely a Ron statement.
Myra says, yes, she's filled with joy is the key to allowing us to define our purpose, and that will 99% allow us to align our journey in this world. Absolutely.
So true. So true.
Ron says, moving forward in joy, count it all joy.
Yes.
The trying of your faith, absolutely. Working with patience. Renee has a comment. Renee says, unspeakable joy is beyond the vision of one, but the destiny of many. Thank you for use to view joy through so many lenses. Oh, thank you for us, she says, to view joy through so many lenses. Absolutely. This is really a refreshing conversation we're having. And PETA talks a lot about failing forward. And I think a lot of your responses today, Thaddeus, are showing us that it's okay to fail forward. And I wonder often, whenever I'm faced with a challenge, I wonder, who am I really afraid of? The people that I would present this new thing that I'm working on to, or this next step that I would take? Am I afraid of their response, or am I afraid from myself, my own internal fears? And I suspect from what you're saying today, it's probably more internal than external.
Yeah. When I look at it for myself, it's all internal, right? Because I've been through a lot in my life, and those challenges have only made me stronger. But even when it comes to if I just speak towards my photography, I'm like, if I go talk to this person, I try to talk myself out of doing certain things, right? Whether it's taking a job, whether it's doing a solo exhibit, I'm like, well, who am I? And so all of those aspects of the challenges of our own self-determination and being able to, we wear masks in many different roles consistently within our positions. But as in my age, being able to pull a lot of those masks off and just be authentically me, be authentically Black as to who I am, and be comfortable in my skin. And be comfortable with who I am, be comfortable with my past has led me to where I am now, and to be able to speak on my challenges. I have one tattoo, and my one tattoo says undefeated, because I believe that I've never lost, I've only learned. And
Mm.
that learning has really put me into the position that I'm in now, to be able to help others and to be able to help them move through these three pandemics, which also have tried another three pandemics within them, to be able to move forward. And so I'm just grateful that I've been able to have that seed of joy nourished at the same time as I've gone through challenges, whether that be trauma, drama, or however we want to define those, and to be able to do some shadow work to remove those things from my system, but to set them in their proper place in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do have one pressing question. We're a little bit over time, but for those people who want to begin to exercise or to try to bring or feel more joy, what might be an exercise that they can do to help them exercise that joy muscle that we have inside of us?
Yeah, I'm a mindful. I believe in mindfulness, and so I believe in meditation. I also I'm a big walker, not a big runner, right? And so I believe getting outside. I'm also a big component of music, because listening to certain music brings emotion just like smell. So you got to be careful what music it is. One of the first questions I asked about my podcast, as I'm building the podcast, is give me 3 songs that bring you joy and tell me why. And so it's those things that are connected to us that we can do in isolation, because I think sometimes we get uncomfortable in isolation and figuring we can only get joy from something else. But the reality is we can get joy from ourselves, and setting small goals and achieving those goals are also a thing of for me that brings you joy, because that helps you build your resilience and get to the
All
next
right.
who you are.
Thank you, Thaddeus. Thank you. All right.
So, Cynthia, what's your big takeaway?
Oh my God, I have so much. But really, it's for me in the very beginning when Thaddeus said, "Joy is where your power lies." I've never looked at it that way, and that I'm taking away. So thank you, Thaddeus.
How
Rebecca.
about you, Rebecca?
I really like what you said about who am I, right? Putting yourself out there on display. I think that's a scary thing to do, but once you do that, you could look around the room and say, wow, who am I? It's almost an epiphany for yourself. So I love that. I love that. Figuring out who you are by putting yourself out there.
Yeah. Peter, how about you? What's your takeaway?
Oh, the connection between joy and purpose.
Oh, yeah.
And that maintaining joy is maintaining centeredness and keeping my eye on long-term goals.
Yeah.
So folks who are joining us online, please put your takeaways in the comments.
And Thaddeus, is there anything you want everyone to take away?
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to something I said before, is naming your truth, accepting and forgiving yourself, and having compassion for yourself is self-love.
Nice. That's where joy comes from. Thaddeus,
I know we're ending. Can I read these ending comments? They're so nice.
I can bring up Reverend Odom's comment.
Really, really quick. Ron says, undefeated. I've never lost. I've only learned. And Renee says, thank you, Thaddeus Miles, for allowing yourself to be used in such a positive manner for so many. That's a great comment, Renee. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee.
All right. Well, thank you,
All
everyone.
right. Thank you so much, Thaddeus.
Thank you.
You.
And
Take
everybody
care.
have a great weekend.
Yes. Bye.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.